Okay, here's an essay question from the January 2010 paper. Essay questions, 16 marks, 25 minutes, so it therefore needs to be a planned paragraphed answer. The question is as follows. It's a quote by a historian. The use of propaganda was the main reason for the lack of opposition to Nazi rule. And you're asked, do you agree? Explain your answer. So what you have in front of you here is a model plan that you could use for this particular question, and you could adapt it very easily for a similar question should a question appear on methods of control in this summer's paper. So before we get into the plan, let's have a close look at the question and what the question is about. Again, pitfalls. The way what often happens is candidates will get blinded by certain words in the question, so they'll see the word propaganda and they'll think, right, all I've got to do is write about Nazi propaganda. They don't really look beneath the question what the question is actually about. And secondly, remember, I deliberately haven't put this into this plan, but in the exam they give you prompts which are useful as starting points, but if all you do is talk about the bullet point prompts, then you will write a very, very limited answer. You've got to move beyond those prompts, which is why this particular plan that you're looking at here is useful for you. Okay, so what's the question really about? The question is really about why there was a lack of opposition to Nazi rule. So it is making certain assumptions. It's assuming there will be a reason to oppose the Nazis, so you'd need to develop that. But it's saying that on the whole there was little opposition to Nazi rule, and it's asking why was there little opposition to Nazi rule. So it's about the reasons for lack of opposition. And what it does is it gives you one reason, the use of propaganda, but it's asking, do you agree that was the main reason? So by implication, the question is requiring you to move beyond just talking about propaganda. It wants you to talk about other reasons why there was lack of opposition. So having analysed the question, hopefully you can therefore see the main building blocks to the answer, which I'll take you through in the plan here. Okay, so start off with the introduction. First of all, remember the introduction, put it into context. It sets your answer up. It needs to lead in to why there was apparently little opposition. So a good way to do this is start off. Hitler, as you know, became Chancellor on the 30th of January 1933, and the last reasonably free elections that happened in Germany for the next 12 years was 6 weeks after Hitler became Chancellor on the 5th of March. These were Reichstag elections, and a really good point to make is that the Nazis won only 44% of the vote. Now, they were the largest party, but they didn't even get a majority, which basically means that more than half the German people, and this was 6 weeks after Hitler became Chancellor, didn't vote for the Nazis. So therefore, it basically means there was a reason to oppose. People were not automatically supporters of the Nazis. Why was that? Well, within weeks, Germany, of course, was a one-party state. People lost their freedoms, yet beneath the surface for the next 12 years, there was very little apparent opposition. So what you're doing in your introduction is setting your answer up. So how would you tackle it? Let's have a look at the paragraphs. So as you can see, there are 5 main paragraphs before you get to your conclusion. So as always, the topic sentence, which is the opening sentence of the paragraph, is the key sentence. If all you were to do is to write the topic sentences, you would have written a pretty decent answer. But obviously you need to time it so that you can develop each topic sentence by adding detail. So you take the topic sentence and then you develop it with the detail, which is in the right-hand column. The faster you write, the more information you can get in, but don't feel you've got to get all that information in that's in the right-hand column. So your first proper paragraph, on the whole, there was very little effective opposition to Nazi rule. So that's what the paragraph is about. Make the point that on the whole, opposition was not effective. Okay, so you can see the type of information. 44% of the vote for the Nazi Party, so nearly half the German people did support the Nazis. There were plebiscites, regular votes, yes or no, do you agree with what the Nazis are doing, which showed there was genuine popular support. There were isolated cases of opposition. You can give examples. Priests who spoke out like Niemöller, youth opposition like the Edelweiss Pirates, the army bomb plot of July 1944. But on the whole, there wasn't very, very strong opposition. It seems that most Germans supported the Nazis. That's the paragraph you develop there. That's paragraph 2, effectively. Paragraph 1 being the introduction. Your next paragraph, paragraph 3, this is where you really pick up the point. Why was this? Okay, and so you develop the idea, yes, you can argue that it was because of effective propaganda. So again, develop that, explain why. Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, mass rallies, use that keyword, indoctrination, censorship, control of information, use of the radio, posters, cinema. Give an example. That's the name of a film that was made that is a very good example of a propaganda film, and obviously the Berlin Olympics 1936. Paragraph 4, continue on the theme of propaganda. You're developing it further, how propaganda worked. Propaganda demanded that people gave complete faith to the Nazi movement. So what you're doing in this paragraph is you're showing how propaganda worked, use of the rituals such as the symbols, the swastika, Hitler's birthday, the 20th of April, Hitler's title as Führer, suppressing other religions, mentioned the Concordat with the Vatican, which tied Catholics into supporting the Nazi regime. So you're really emphasising the notion of faith, that people were supposed to follow Hitler without thinking about it. And on the whole, that was very, very effectively put across through propaganda. So you've with those 2 paragraphs, you've written a pretty decent chunk of the essay. You then move into paragraph 5, and what you're doing here is you're starting to move into, there were other reasons that there was lack of opposition. And this particular paragraph, you're making the key point that life improved for ordinary Germans, particularly in the early years, 1933 to 36, the first 4 years of Hitler's regime. Why? Because Hitler, really, the Nazis did a lot to resolve the unemployment problem. They brought about work through National Labour Service. Standard of living improved to some extent. We've covered all of those before. The Strength Through Joy scheme, which arranged cheap holidays, the marriage loan scheme, opportunities for newlyweds, children liked the Hitler Youth, and of course the successors in international relations. Hitler managed to remilitarise the Rhineland and incorporate Austria into Germany without taking Germany to war. So in the first few years of the regime, the Nazis were genuinely popular because of their achievements. That was a reason why there was lack of opposition. You then move into the final paragraph, where you say, but beneath it all, it wasn't all about propaganda and successes. There was underlying terror. Okay, the Nazis used violence. So again, you can demonstrate that with lots of examples. You can mention about the SS, the loss of personal freedom, the concentration camps, the violence of the SA, particularly in the early year where it was used against the communists in 1933. That was a positive factor, of course, that made many of the middle classes appreciate the regime. But later on, the SA violence against the Jews in Kristallnacht, the fear of the Gestapo, party block wardens and informers, fear of being reported by a neighbour to the Gestapo, the fact that outsiders were sent to concentration camps, all of these factors were known by ordinary Germans, and it would have made them fearful. So what you've done here is you've written a balanced answer. You then move into the conclusion, the final paragraph, and pull it together. And again, a really useful way of answering this, of doing the conclusion, is to say that propaganda was certainly effective. It wasn't the only factor. It latched onto the successes of the regime. It publicised the creation of jobs, the national unity and pride, which made people proud of Nazi achievements, particularly in the early years, 1933 to 36. But then as the war approached, as we start to approach the war, 1938 to 39, life became less pleasant, fear became more of a factor, and there were more reasons to grumble. The standard of living did not match the achievements as war began to approach in the late 30s. That would be your conclusion.